Welcome back to Analysis, where we've been looking at the death sentences handed out to hundreds of Muslim Brotherhood members by an Egyptian court. For this part of the discussion, we're joined by Nicholas Pashode from Amnesty International and by Mohammed Sudan, UK representative of the Muslim Brotherhood, and my guests from the first part, Ian Least and Peter Oborne, are still with me. Mohammed, I mean, even by the standards of this government, that was a shock. Are they really going to carry it out?
I believe this is the agenda of the military coup authority, to scare the Egyptian people. Just they are trying to stop the kind of protest since they started their coup in July the 3rd, but they could not. And then they tried to choose this kind of way. Maybe when they use the execution or a court verdict like this to scare the Egyptian people. But I believe this will not going to work. No, they're going to get the opposite result, not because today a lot of people, and yesterday in the evening, many people, maybe thousands of people more than regular, they went to the streets to protest against this kind of decision or a court decision. Yeah, no way.
Nicholas, Amnesty produced a report very quickly about this. Never mind about the sentence, but the whole process by which the court proceeded. Many of the defendants weren't there. Their lawyers weren't there.
Yes,
amazing.
it was a grossly unfair process at every stage, from the criminal prosecution to the judge in the room. Lawyers told us that they weren't able to represent some of the defendants. Other defendants were sentenced in their absence. When the lawyers protested not being able to read the case file, the judge ordered armed security guards to surround them. This was, essentially a gross miscarriage of justice at every stage of the proceedings.
And what's your expectation about what will happen now? Will the appeal just squash these? Because there is an appeal. Will it just squash these sentences?
Well, right now, let's be clear, these are dead men walking. We hope that there will be an appeal and that those who are sentenced in absentia will be retried. But I think, as we're all learning in Egypt, anything could happen and there's no guarantee. I think what we need to do really is to take a step back and look at the serious failings of Egypt's criminal justice system at all levels. I think the question needs to be asked, is the judicial system fit for purpose? And I think the answer very clearly from the trial that we saw is absolutely not.
Ian, you were saying in the first half, you can't really calibrate a politicised judiciary like this against the way it would happen in a stable or relatively stable parliamentary democracy. I mean, the detail of the trial that we've heard bears that out, as well as the end sentences, doesn't it?
It's clearly not a fair trial or due process as we would understand the term in Europe. So, as your speaker has said, one would like to think these judgments will be overturned, but I imagine, as in all courts, they depend upon the quality of the judiciary and the standards by which are implemented during the trial process. So, if you want to improve your Egyptian court system, first and foremost, you need men who are going to implement the basic principles of justice in your trial process. And one looks at a politicised trial process and think you've got political judges acting out the will of the executive. So I don't know the constituency of the judiciary, but inevitably there will be good men who somehow, through appointment or through the implementation of a different set of rules, come to office.
So, Peter, how do you read the international reaction to this? Because, William Hague's made a statement saying this is an absolutely terrible thing. We don't actually get the feeling that the course of events in Egypt is producing howling from the rooftops in the way that it perhaps would if similar things were happening in some other places.
Well, yeah, and to go a bit further than what you've just said, imagine it had been the Muslim Brotherhood which had done this. Yeah. Imagine it had been an Islamist government which had shot dead 1,200 or more people in the streets, and then sort of through extrajudicial sort of ordered the extrajudicial execution, effectively, of hundreds more. Imagine how outraged Mr. Hague would have been, and Mr. Kerry and the Western newspapers. Absolutely, this just shows you can never entrust a democracy to Islamist regime. But now our friends, Mr. Sisi is here, these very sensible, grave generals. We won't make a noise about that because they're on our side. They are, to quote Senator Kerry, they are there to restore democracy. Mr. Sisi could not do anything wrong because he's our ally in the war on terror. It's grotesque. The reputation of the West lies in shreds for its failure even to call what happened in Egypt a coup d'etat. We are surreptitiously, secretly supporting the disgusting regime which is doing these things, and we were accomplices in removing the democratically elected Muslim Brotherhood government. It makes me very, very ashamed. I mean, look at the amazing noise which Mr. Hague, our increasingly deluded foreign secretary, is making about what is going on in Ukraine, and compared to the silence which we're getting in Egypt.
What's Amnesty's take on this? When you issue a report like that, can you tell what the kind of take-up from the international community, so-called, is? Are you experiencing what you'd expect to be the take-up, I guess, is what I'm saying?
I think for months the international community has been damned by their silence on the gross human rights violations we've seen in Egypt. Actually, 27 states spoke up in the Human Rights Council a couple of weeks ago, but that was, I think, more than 6 months after the mass killings at Rabat al-Adawiya. I think what we're seeing really is the international community providing words, but not real action. Even in cases where they've suspended arms, they are beginning to think about, continuing the arms supply. But I think we also have to look at the failings within Egypt, and that includes Egypt's judicial system. There's a real problem of selectivity of justice here. I think it's very telling that over 520 people have been sentenced to death for killing one police officer, but only one police officer is now serving a prison sentence in relation to the massive human rights violations which have been happening since 3rd of July.
Mohammed, how are you finding now that the kind of there's no doubt that the Brotherhood was isolated in the immediate aftermath of the coup. I mean, perhaps not in Egypt amongst its supporters, but in the international arena. Are you getting a hearing that you didn't get then now?
Let me tell you something else, because yes, what's doing now in Egypt is that they divided the society in Egypt. Two divisions is anti-coup and they belong to the coup. But the problem is how that the judiciary belong to this. Even Mubarak could not do that. Even Mubarak could not do that. And since the coup started, you see that when the 37 people being killed inside the car, the truck which they transfer the defense from prison to other one, and then what the court did, just give the officer who are responsible for this 10 years sentences, and the other is free. Release them. Here is 37 people being killed
by the police.
Yeah, by the police. Yes, and here is the court, the same court. How they deal? It's double standard. It's double standard, and I believe this is very dangerous. When the judiciary is failed like this, that means that it's failing for the state. All the state going to fail. And that never been happened in the era of Mubarak. Never happened like this. When Mubarak tried to do something against their oppositions, he go to the military courts to do this. He did with us 5 military courts before, when he fell with the civilian courts. But now I'm really wondering how Sisi did this. I understand that because of Morsi want to reform the judiciary many times, and because he knows that there are some corruption in the judiciary, and he wants to reform that, then he became their enemy, and they won't know ever to come back to Morsi era. This is the situation, but not like this.
It's an interesting, I mean, not that this should happen to anybody, whatever their religious or political affiliations, but very many of the defendants in this case are not, in fact, Muslim Brotherhood members, are they?
No. I tell you the truth. Many people doesn't know, maybe they don't know this. It's only 10% of the 545 people are belong to Muslim Brotherhood, and the rest is just the regular Egyptian people. This is the point. It is it is a war against the anti-coup people, not for the Muslims or not for the anti-coup people. It's for Muslim Brotherhood. It's for anyone opposition for the coup authority.
I mean, Ian, the justification for this, the political justification for this, has been played back to the West by Field Marshal al-Sisi. This is a war on terror. This is a terrorist organisation. Do you think that whenever you begin to hear that kind of language in Egypt or anywhere else, that you're beginning to get a kind of blanket political charge being used, which is going to interfere with the normal process of a trial? Well,
if you hold trials as described here this afternoon, 500 individuals tried in the course of a trial process, what you're really doing is sending out a message that the normal norms that underpin a legitimate society wherever in the world have disintegrated. So the message you're sending out is not that you're a legitimate authority governing the people, but rather that you are an illegitimate government, that you've lost any sense of normality and legitimacy, and I think that's what I would draw from the description of events as they've taken place. So, how you get back to normal internationally accepted principles of fairness is probably another conversation, and we're sitting here talking about Egypt as being a very dangerous place indeed. And that would be the message I would take from the events of yesterday. So we're not really talking in normal terms of a civil society acting in one way or another. We're talking about a society that's descending into chaos or on the verge of it.
I mean, Peter, there is a sort of deep irony here about the way in which Sisi is justifying this. He's playing back to the West the language of the war on terror, isn't he? And it's a kind of hard one to deal with if that's the language you've been speaking for a decade or more.
Exactly, because you can see it works. There's no question he has a certain amount of support, and I think much more support than is internationally visible. I think it's embarrassing to support somebody, Sisi, who does such terrible things, but quietly there is clearly a kind of sanction and endorsement to a great deal of what is going on, and he's framing his opponents outrageously as terrorists. He's named, every single member of the Muslim Brotherhood is a terrorist. Every single supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood is named 40% of the Egyptian people as terrorists. But of course, if you're now dealing with a country like America, where the knowledge of international affairs and the Middle East is less than zero, you play into the agenda of Fox News and the Republican Party, and it makes sense in America that, and it's grotesque actually what is now happening, and of course it is the agenda set by George W. Bush 12 years ago being carried through by Sisi, and it is something which I would like to see Britain distance ourselves from. I would like to see Mr. Hague being far, far stronger. He must name this as a coup d'etat. Yeah. We must talk about sanctions. We're talking about sanctions against Russia. Why aren't we talking about sanctions now against the Sisi, the murderers at the heart of the Sisi regime? Yeah.
Amnesty, are you worried about what this trial may mean in terms of the prosecutions against Morsi?
Well, I think this trial sets a very dangerous and deadly precedent across the board, not just for Mohamed Morsi, but for the thousands of his supporters who are currently languishing in prison. But I think, there are also wider issues at stake here. As much as it would be easy to portray this as the actions of a rogue judge, there are serious root and branch concerns with the judicial system. But I think we also have to realize that for years, the prosecution has been a weapon in the hands of the authorities to crush dissent. And unfortunately, that was also the case under Mohamed Morsi's government. He had a chance to reform the prosecution, but instead we documented dozens of criminal prosecutions of his opponents. This was also the case under the military authorities and, of course, Mubarak. What is needed now is serious reform to ensure due process for all of those detained.
Mohammed, do you think there's a case now for an international team of lawyers to try and get into Egypt and to try and at least exert some pressure, or at least to observe these processes and report more widely? I mean, it is relatively little reported.
I think tomorrow we have a very important hearing in the ICC, in the International Criminal Court, and I think one of the reasons because of this court decision is the tomorrow hearing, and also today is the meeting of the Arab League, and they try to make propaganda that the Muslim Brotherhood are terrorism, and here we have a court decision. It's not a military decision, it's a court decision, court verdict that those people are terrorists, these people, the execution, they should be sentenced to death. And that is the way they want to spread, to distort the reputation of the Muslim Brotherhood. And before those, the Arab League and meetings, which made it today, and also tomorrow, it's very important hearing for the ICC about the case. And believe me, they are very, very scared. Sisi and his thugs, the group of thugs, actually, they are not legitimate people. Those people stole Egypt, stole the legitimate power from the Egyptian people, are scaring from this. And they are very scared to get out of the country because of this case.
Ian, what about, I mean, this is a case where a reputable group of internationally renowned lawyers should get in there and start looking at this process and reporting on it.
Well, I think in the aftermath now we shall see whether that will be the case or not. But everything that's been said and we've heard this afternoon suggests there ought to be some widely publicised outrage and comment upon the procedures that are taking place in Europe, and Amnesty International, the Foreign Office in this country, anywhere really. So the start is publicising what's happened, saying this does not correspond to internationally acceptable norms. And within Egypt itself, there needs to be some protest against a trial of this nature.
Peter, what do you think? Because I mean, sometimes these delegations go to places, but I mean, this does seem to be A, an extraordinary case, and B, the degree to which the news of it is failing to be reported. This might just be a case where such a delegation would make a difference. Do you think?
Well, I think it is the case now that Egypt under Sisi is turning itself very quickly into a pariah state, and where the international community has to, if it's going to maintain its reputation, it has to look at ways in which as it tries to rebuild civil society. Protests within Egypt, I don't know. I mean, it's so dangerous to go on the streets in Egypt and risk being shot dead. And so I really don't know how easy it is anymore. We've seen the incredible bravery of the Egyptian people. And so I do think that it is important for the international community to start to confront the regime and say and express in tangible ways, perhaps more tangible than we've seen so far, the kind of repellent and disgust. And certainly, I'm afraid to say that the Secretary of State Kerry really has to start to change his language, and we can't talk about this as a part of this gorgeous process of restoring democracy, to use Secretary Kerry's epithet. Something's gone horribly wrong.
OK, well, I think that's about where we're going to have to leave the discussion. My thanks to all my studio guests and to Karim Manara, who joined us from Cairo earlier in the programme. We will, of course, be following, as we have done throughout the Egyptian revolution, all these developments. So welcome back to future editions of Analysis to see what's happening and what we can do about it. Thanks for watching.